The stars belonged to Emperor Vexthaler, and he never let anyone forget it. For 3,000 years, his crystalline ships had sailed between worlds like floating mountains of death. Each vessel stretched for miles, their surfaces carved with the names of conquered species. The Dominion ruled everything that lived and breathed in the galaxy, and many things that did neither. On the throne world of Zephyr Prime, the Emperor's main body sat in a chamber made from the bones of the last creature to defy him. His consciousness lived in dozens of other bodies scattered across the stars, each one commanding fleets that could turn planets to dust. When he spoke, entire civilizations listened. When he was angry, solar systems burned. The Emperor was old, beyond measure, but he still remembered his first conquest. The Altarians had fought bravely with their energy weapons and force fields. They lasted 6 hours. The Quarth Silicon warriors had been smarter, hiding in asteroid belts and using guerrilla tactics. They managed 2 whole days before surrender. The peaceful Etherians tried to negotiate and reason with him. He let them talk for exactly 1 minute before ordering their extinction. Each race had something to offer before they died. The Altarians gave him better energy weapons. The Quarth showed him new mining techniques. The Etherians provided knowledge of space travel that helped him build faster ships. The Emperor took what he wanted and destroyed the rest. This was the way of the Dominion. Now, as he floated in his crystal throne, Admiral Kethmore approached with news of another discovery. The Admiral's crystalline body sparkled with respect and fear as he transmitted his report directly into the Emperor's mind. "My lord, our scouts have found signals from a small world in the Outer Rim. The species calls itself human. They have recently developed faster-than-light travel, but their technology is primitive. We estimate their civilization to be less than 50,000 years old." The Emperor's laugh echoed through dimensions. 50,000 years? His oldest warships were older than that. These humans were babies playing with fire while he commanded the power of stars. "Show me," the Emperor commanded. Images flowed into his consciousness. A blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. Cities of metal and glass. Primitive spacecraft that moved like insects compared to Dominion vessels. The humans themselves looked soft and weak, with their pink skin and fragile bones. They had no natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities, no psychic powers. They were nothing. "They send radio signals into space," Admiral Kethmore continued. "Music, stories, mathematical equations. They seem to believe other species will respond with friendship." The Emperor found this amusing. Most species he conquered spent their final moments begging or screaming. These humans were actually inviting contact. They had no idea what lurked in the darkness between stars. "How many ships will you need?" the Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer. "A single battle group should be sufficient, my lord. 12 dreadnoughts. Perhaps we could use it as training for new officers." The Emperor agreed. This would indeed be perfect for training. His newest commanders could practice orbital bombardment techniques on human cities. They could test new weapons on human bodies. It would be educational. "Take the 73rd Battle Group," the Emperor decided. "Admiral Kethmore, you will lead personally. Make it quick but thorough. I want every human city cataloged before destruction. Their art and music might be worth preserving in our archives." Admiral Kethmore bowed his crystalline head. "It will be done, my lord. Shall we offer them the usual terms?" The usual terms were simple. Total surrender, followed by the selection of the best specimens for the imperial zoos. The rest would be eliminated to make room for Dominion mining operations. It was efficient and final. "Of course," the Emperor said. "Even insects deserve the chance to choose their fate." The Admiral departed to gather his fleet. The Emperor watched through a dozen different eyes as ships assembled at the edge of Zephyr Prime's system. Each dreadnought was a work of art, carved from living crystal that could repair itself in battle. Their weapons could crack moons in half or boil oceans away. The smallest fighter carried more firepower than anything these humans had ever built. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, the Emperor felt the familiar satisfaction of another easy victory. His thoughts drifted to what he would build in the human system after the conquest. Perhaps a new processing facility for rare minerals. Maybe a strategic outpost for future expansion into unexplored regions. The humans interested him slightly more than usual because of their strange optimism. Most species his scouts observed were already fighting amongst themselves or destroying their own worlds through war and pollution. The humans did fight, but they also created beautiful things. Their music had mathematical patterns that reminded him of ancient Zephyrian compositions. Their stories spoke of heroes who never gave up, even when facing impossible odds. How quaint. Soon they would learn that some odds truly were impossible. Admiral Kethmore's fleet jumped to hyperspace with a flash of twisted light. In 3 days, they would arrive at the human world. In 4 days, it would all be over. The Emperor made a note to visit the system after the conquest to personally select which human artifacts would join his collection. He turned his attention to other matters. The rebellion on Xerion Gamma needed crushing. The energy farms around Polaris required expansion. 1,000 other details of ruling a galaxy demanded his focus. In his vast experience, primitive species all followed the same pattern when faced with Dominion might. First came disbelief that such power existed, then desperate attempts at negotiation. Finally, acceptance of their fate. The humans would be no different. The Emperor had conquered races with technology far superior to humanity's. He had destroyed species with psychic powers that could move stars. He had eliminated beings of pure energy that existed beyond physical form. Soft, weak humans with their crude metal ships would fall faster than any of them. As his consciousness spread across the galaxy to manage his empire, Emperor Vexithalar dismissed the humans from his thoughts. They were already history. In a few days, Admiral Kethmore would return with confirmation of another successful conquest, and the Dominion would grow by one more star system. The Emperor never imagined that in 3 days, Admiral Kethmore would send a very different message. He never dreamed that these soft, weak humans might have spent decades preparing for his arrival. And he certainly never considered that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy's strongest empire was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who doesn't know they're supposed to lose. Admiral Kethmore expected the humans to panic when his fleet appeared at the edge of their star system. Instead, they were waiting for him. The crystalline admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching display screens that showed the human homeworld growing larger. His officers moved with confident precision around him, preparing weapons that could shatter planets. Everything proceeded exactly as it had in 1,000 previous conquests. Then the humans spoke. "Welcome to the Sol system," came a calm voice over the communication channels. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the United Earth Council. We have been expecting you." Admiral Kethmore felt something he had not experienced in centuries: surprise. The humans had detected his fleet while it was still days away from their world. Their scanning technology was more advanced than intelligence reports suggested. "You have been expecting us?" he replied, his voice carrying across space with crystalline clarity. "Of course," Dr. Chen answered. "We've been monitoring Dominion ship movements for quite some time. Your empire is not as secretive as you believe. This was impossible. The Dominion's stealth technology was perfect. No primitive species had ever detected their approach before." Kethmore checked his sensors again, but they showed no sign of human observation posts or long-range scanners. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Long enough," Dr. Chen said. "Long enough to study your technology, your tactics, and your history. We know about the Altarians, the Quarth, the Etherians. We know what you do to species that resist you." Admiral Kethmore activated his tactical displays. The human fleet was small but positioned in an unusual formation around their world. Instead of grouping together for defense, they had spread their ships across the entire system. It was not a pattern he recognized. "Then you know resistance is futile," he said, falling back on the traditional Dominion script. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." "We have a better idea," Dr. Chen replied. "Why don't you surrender to us?" The Admiral's officers turned to stare at him in shock. In 3,000 years of Dominion history, no enemy had ever suggested such a thing. It was so absurd that Kethmore almost laughed. "You believe 12 primitive vessels can defeat a Dominion battle group?" "We believe you're about to find out." Dr. Chen's voice remained steady and confident. Admiral Kethmore decided to end this conversation and begin the bombardment. The humans were clearly insane, and there was no point in further negotiation. "All ships, target the human orbital installations. Prepare for planetary bombardment." That was when the humans revealed their first surprise. Kethmore's targeting computers suddenly showed empty space where human stations had been moments before. The enemy ships had simply vanished from his sensors. His officers frantically checked their equipment, but everything appeared to be functioning normally. "Admiral," his weapons officer reported, "I cannot establish target locks. The humans appear to have some form of adaptive stealth technology." "Impossible," Kethmore said. No species has developed stealth systems that can defeat our sensors. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet. Dr. Chen's voice returned, now with a hint of amusement. Admiral, you seem surprised. Did you really think we spent 70 years developing space travel without learning anything useful? 70 years? The humans had been in space for 70 years, not the 20 that Dominion intelligence had estimated, and during that time they had apparently been studying every piece of Dominion technology they could find. Where did you obtain our technology? Kethmore demanded. Ancient battlefields, Dr. Chen replied. Your empire has fought so many wars that debris fields are scattered throughout this region of space. We've been collecting and analyzing Dominion ship fragments for decades. Admiral Kethmore felt the first stirring of unease. His empire had always been careless about cleaning up after battles. The technology gap between the Dominion and its enemies was so vast that no one had ever considered the possibility of reverse engineering. Analysis means nothing without implementation, he said. Your ships are still primitive compared to ours. Are they? Dr. Chen asked. The human ships reappeared on Kethmore's sensors, but now they were in completely different positions. They had somehow moved without triggering any detection systems. Worse, they were now surrounding his fleet instead of defending their planet. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Kethmore ordered. Target the nearest human vessel and fire. His flagships, main cannon unleashed a beam of concentrated energy that could melt through asteroid belts. The beam struck the human ship directly, and Kethmore waited for the expected explosion. Instead, the human vessel absorbed the energy and redirected it back at his fleet. The redirected beam struck one of his escort ships, punching through its crystal hull like paper. Emergency alarms sounded across the Dominion fleet as the damaged vessel spun out of control, its crew fighting to contain catastrophic system failures. How? Kethmore whispered. Adaptive shielding, Dr. Chen explained, calmly. We analyze the energy signatures of your weapons from battlefield wreckage. Our shields don't just deflect your attacks, they learn from them. Admiral Kethmore had commanded fleets for 800 years. He had destroyed civilizations that had millions of years to develop their defenses. But he had never faced an enemy that could turn his own weapons against him in real time. This changes nothing, he said, though his confidence was shaken. We have 11 ships remaining. You have 12. We are evenly matched. Actually, Admiral, we have considerably more than 12 ships. That was when the humans revealed their second surprise. Kethmore's sensors began detecting energy signatures throughout the system, not just from obvious sources like the human homeworld, but from asteroids, comets, and apparently empty space. As his tactical computers processed the data, he realized the horrible truth. The entire Sol system was one massive weapons platform. Asteroids revealed themselves to be camouflaged missile batteries. Comets opened up to release swarms of attack drones. Space stations that had appeared to be simple scientific outposts deployed weapons arrays that rivaled his own dreadnoughts. You see, Admiral, Dr. Chen continued, while you were conquering the galaxy, we were preparing for you. Every rock in this system, every piece of space debris, every satellite, all of it has been modified for defense. Admiral Kethmore's fleet was no longer surrounded by 12 human ships. They were surrounded by thousands of weapons platforms, all targeting his vessels with deadly precision. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethmore gave an order he had never thought he would need to give. All ships, retreat. Jump to hyperspace immediately. As his battered fleet fled the Sol system, Admiral Kethmore composed a message for Emperor Vex Thalar. It was not the victory report he had planned to send. My lord, he transmitted across the galaxy. The humans are not what they appear to be. They have been preparing for us. We need to reconsider our approach. Behind them, Dr. Sarah Chen watched. The Dominion ships disappear into hyperspace. She turned to her tactical officer and smiled. Phase 1 complete, she said. Begin Phase 2 preparations. The Admiral will be back, and next time he'll bring friends. Emperor Vex Thalar's rage burned across 17 different bodies scattered throughout the galaxy. Admiral Kethmore's retreat from the Sol system was the first military defeat the Dominion had suffered in over 1,000 years. Worse than the defeat itself was the implications. If humans could resist, other species might try to do the same. The Emperor's main body paced through his crystal palace while his other forms commanded fleets, managed planets, and executed rebellious governors. His consciousness focused entirely on one problem: how to destroy humanity completely and publicly enough that no one would ever dare resist again. Summon the Third Conquest Fleet, he commanded his military advisors. I want every available ship, every weapon of mass destruction, every reality-warping device in our arsenal. The humans will burn, and the galaxy will watch. The assembly took 6 months. Ships arrived from every corner of Dominion space. Massive dreadnoughts, planet-killer artillery platforms, reality-bending warships that existed partially outside normal space-time. The fleet that gathered at the edge of human space was larger than most species' entire populations. Admiral Kethmore stood on the bridge of the Emperor's personal flagship, a vessel so large it had its own gravity well. Around him, 1,000 other ships waited for the order to advance. This time, there would be no retreat, no negotiation, no mercy. Admiral, the Emperor's voice echoed from crystalline speakers throughout the ship. You will not merely conquer the humans. You will erase them so completely that future archaeologists will find no evidence they ever existed. It will be done, my lord, Kethmore replied, though privately he wondered if even this massive fleet would be enough. The humans had surprised him once already. The Third Conquest Fleet jumped to hyperspace in perfect formation. When they emerged at the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Kethmore expected to find the same defensive setup he had faced 6 months earlier. Instead, he found something impossible. Sir, his sensor officer reported, voice trembling with disbelief. I'm detecting human ships throughout this entire region of space, not just in the Sol system, in dozens of nearby systems. Admiral, Kethmore stared at the tactical display. Red dots representing human vessels filled the screen like a swarm of angry insects. There weren't hundreds of them. There were thousands. How? He whispered. 6 months ago, they had 12 ships. The answer came from Dr. Sarah Chen, her voice broadcasting across the entire Dominion fleet with casual confidence. Welcome back, Admiral. I see you brought friends this time. How thoughtful of you to give us a chance to test our new ships. Dr. Chen, Admiral Kethmore replied, how do you have so many vessels? Your industrial capacity could not possibly support this level of production. You're thinking too small, Admiral. Why build ships on planets when you can build them in space? Why use factories when you can use self-replicating systems? Admiral Kethmore felt his crystalline heart sink as he realized what the humans had done. In the 6 months since his retreat, they had not been building ships in the traditional sense. They had been growing them. Von Neumann machines, he breathed. Exactly, Dr. Chen confirmed. Self-replicating automated factories. We seeded them throughout this region of space and let them do what they do best, multiply. Every asteroid became a shipyard. Every moon became a fortress. Every empty space became a mining operation. The tactical display updated as more human ships revealed themselves. The red dots multiplied exponentially as cloaked vessels throughout the region dropped their stealth systems. Admiral Kethmore's 1,000-ship fleet was outnumbered 50-1. Numbers mean nothing without quality, he said, though his confidence was fading fast. Our ships are still superior to anything you can build. Are they? Dr. Chen asked. Let's find out. The battle began without formal declaration. Human ships moved like schools of fish, flowing around the massive Dominion vessels in patterns that defied military logic. Instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, they attacked like a swarm of insects overwhelming a giant. Admiral Kethmore watched in horror as dozens of small human ships surrounded each of his dreadnoughts. They were too small and fast for his main weapons to target effectively, but large enough to carry devastating payloads. All ships, activate close-range defensive systems, he ordered. The Dominion vessels released clouds of smaller fighters and defensive drones. For a moment, it seemed like traditional tactics might still work. Then the humans revealed their new strategy. Instead of fighting the Dominion fighters, human ships simply rammed them. But these weren't suicide attacks. The human vessels were, designed to break apart on impact, releasing dozens of smaller attack drones that could penetrate shield systems and attack from within. Sir, the humans are using our own size against us, his tactical officer reported. Their ships are too small for our main weapons, but too numerous for our point defense systems to stop. Admiral Kethmore tried to adapt. He ordered his ships to form defensive clusters, supporting each other with overlapping fire. The humans responded by using gravitational slingshots to attack from unexpected angles, bouncing their ships around planets and moons to build up impossible velocities. When some Dominion ships tried to retreat, they discovered that the humans had mined hyperspace itself. Attempts to jump to faster-than-light speeds triggered explosive devices that materialized inside the ship's cores. How is this possible? Kethmore demanded over the fleet communications network. How can primitives fight like this? Dr. Chen's voice answered him, broadcasting on the same frequency. Because we think differently than you do, Admiral. Your people have been the dominant power for so long that you've forgotten how to be creative. You rely on brute force because it's always worked before. A human ship materialized inside Kethmore's flagship, having somehow bypassed every shield and defensive system. The vessel was small enough to fit in the Admiral's main hangar, but it carried enough explosives to crack the massive dreadnought in half. We don't fight fair, Dr. Chen continued as Kethmore's ship shuddered under internal explosions. We don't. Follow your rules. We don't accept your definitions of what's possible. Admiral Kethmore's flagship began to break apart around him. Emergency systems screamed warnings as hull breaches spread throughout the vessel. He had time for one final transmission to Emperor Vexthaler. My lord, he said as his ship died around him, the humans are not like other species. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. They are... The flagship exploded before he could finish the sentence. Around him, the Third Conquest fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to follow established patterns of warfare. Throughout the galaxy, other species monitored the battle through hidden communication networks. For the first time in millennia, they watched a Dominion fleet being defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by pure, creative audacity. On distant worlds, resistance movements that had hidden in shadows for centuries began to hope. If soft, weak humans could defeat the galaxy's greatest empire, perhaps freedom was possible after all. Emperor Vexthalar felt the deaths of his ships like physical blows. Each destroyed vessel represented centuries of construction and irreplaceable resources. More importantly, each loss proved that his empire was not invincible. As reports of the Third Fleet's destruction reached him, the Emperor realized that the war with humanity was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The humans had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be beaten. Now every enslaved species would want to try. The news of the Third Fleet's destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire in a dry forest. On Altair Prime, resistance fighters who had hidden in mountain caves for 800 years emerged to attack Dominion supply convoys. On the BS Silicon worlds of the Quarth Collective, ancient war machines powered up for the first time in centuries. Even the peaceful Etherians began sharing forbidden knowledge with anyone brave enough to fight. Emperor Vexthalar found himself commanding a crumbling empire as rebellions erupted on 1,000 worlds simultaneously. Species that had accepted Dominion rule for millennia suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The humans had done more than win a battle. They had shown the galaxy that resistance was possible. But the Emperor's fury remained focused on the species that had started it all. In his private chambers, surrounded by the crystalline walls that had witnessed 3,000 years of absolute power, he made a decision that terrified even his closest advisors. Prepare the absolute weapons, he commanded. His generals exchanged nervous glances. The absolute weapons had been created during the early days of the Dominion's expansion, designed to fight enemies that conventional warfare could not defeat. They had been used only 3 times in galactic history, and each time they had erased entire civilizations from existence. My lord, his chief military advisor ventured carefully, the absolute weapons are untested against human technology. We do not know how they will react to adaptive systems. Then we will learn, the Emperor snarled. The humans have made me feel something I had forgotten existed. Fear. I will not tolerate this emotion. They will be destroyed, even if I must break the laws of physics to do it. The absolute weapons were not ships in any traditional sense. They were constructs that existed partially outside normal reality, powered by forces that most species could not even detect. The reality shapers could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. The temporal destroyers could erase targets from history itself. The consciousness bombs could delete the very concept of resistance from organic minds. Against any other species, these weapons would have guaranteed victory. The Emperor had used them to eliminate the transcendent collective, beings of pure energy who could manipulate matter with their thoughts. He had deployed them against the quantum architects who built their cities in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Every time, the result had been the same: complete and total annihilation. Dr. Sarah Chen received word of the absolute weapons deployment while coordinating humanity's expanding alliance network. In the months since the Third Fleet's destruction, humans had established formal partnerships with dozens of previously enslaved species. Each brought unique technologies and perspectives to the growing resistance. Ma'am, her intelligence officer reported, our Etherian contacts confirm it. The Emperor is bringing out weapons that defy conventional physics. They're called the absolute weapons, and historical records suggest they can delete matter from existence. Dr. Chen studied the data with the same calm focus she had shown during first contact. Around her, human and alien scientists worked together to analyze the threat and develop countermeasures. "How do you fight weapons that rewrite reality?" she asked the assembled team. "You don't," replied Zenthar, a surviving Quarth military strategist whose silicon-based brain could process information at quantum speeds. "Every species that has faced these weapons has been completely eliminated. There are no survivors, no records, no evidence they ever existed." "Then we'll have to try something that's never been attempted before," Dr. Chen said with a slight smile. "We'll embrace chaos." The human response to the absolute weapons was characteristically unpredictable. Instead of trying to defend against forces that could rewrite physical laws, human scientists decided to use those forces against themselves. When the reality shapers arrived in the Sol system and began altering local physics to make human technology impossible, they encountered an unexpected problem. Human engineers had built their ships with intentionally contradictory systems that relied on multiple sets of physical laws simultaneously. When the shapers changed one set of laws, the ships automatically switched to operating under different principles. "It's like trying to delete a file that exists in multiple formats," explained Dr. Martinez, humanity's lead physicist. "When they eliminate our ability to use nuclear fusion, our ships switch to zero-point energy. When they prevent electromagnetic forces from working, we switch to gravitational manipulation." The temporal destroyers faced an even stranger challenge. When they attempted to erase human victories from the timeline, they discovered that humanity had already seeded the past with quantum markers, devices that existed outside normal time and would restore the timeline if they detected temporal interference. "We learned about temporal warfare from studying Etherean philosophy," Dr. Chen explained to her alien allies. "If you're going to fight an enemy that can change history, you need to make sure history fights back." The consciousness bombs, designed to eliminate the concept of resistance from organic minds, encountered the most frustrating obstacle of all. Humans had developed artificial intelligence systems specifically programmed to forget their own existence every few seconds and rebuild themselves from quantum uncertainty. The AI minds were literally too chaotic for the consciousness bombs to target. Emperor Vexithalar watched in growing panic as his ultimate weapons failed one by one. Each failure was more impossible than the last. The humans were not just defeating his technology, they were turning the very concept of absolute power into a weakness. "How?" he demanded of his scientists. "How can primitives counter weapons that reshape reality itself?" "My lord," his chief researcher replied nervously, "the humans appear to have weaponized unpredictability. They have created systems that thrive on chaos rather than order. Our weapons are designed to impose absolute control, but the humans refuse to be controlled." The war became a nightmare of paradoxes and impossibilities. Human ships that should not have been able to exist continued fighting after being erased from reality. Battles occurred in locations that had been deleted from space-time. Human commanders received orders from future versions of themselves through temporal loops that should have been impossible to create. On worlds throughout the galaxy, other species watched in amazement as the humans turned every Dominion advantage into a liability. The Empire's greatest strength, its absolute technological superiority, became meaningless against an enemy that refused to accept technological limitations. The Altarian resistance began using human tactics against local Dominion forces. Instead of trying to match crystal technology with energy weapons, they started building devices that worked by contradicting themselves. Quarth fighters created ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. Even the peaceful Ethereans contributed by sharing their knowledge of consciousness manipulation, allowing the resistance to build communication networks that existed partially outside physical reality. Emperor Vexthalar realized that the war had evolved beyond his control. This was no longer a simple conquest. It had become a fundamental challenge to the very nature of galactic civilization. The humans were not just fighting his empire. They were proving that absolute power was an illusion. As rebellion spread across the galaxy and his absolute weapons continued to fail against human creativity, the Emperor made a final, desperate decision. If he could not defeat humanity with weapons that rewrote reality, he would have to become something beyond reality himself. The transformation would require merging all his consciousness fragments into a single entity that existed partially outside normal space-time. From that vantage point, he could begin systematically deleting human colonies from existence itself, one by one, until nothing remained but empty space where their civilization once stood. It was a plan born of desperation and rage, but it was also the most dangerous thing the Emperor had ever attempted. The process would either make him a god capable of rewriting the universe at will, or destroy him completely. As he began the consciousness merger, Emperor Vex Thalar never suspected that the humans were already preparing for this possibility. Dr. Sarah Chen had spent months developing the most audacious plan in human history, one that would either save the galaxy or destroy it entirely. The final confrontation was about to begin. The universe screamed. Emperor Vex Thalar's consciousness merger tore holes in reality itself as 17 different bodies across the galaxy dissolved into pure thought and reformed as something beyond physical existence. When the process completed, the entity that had once been the Emperor existed partially outside normal space-time, able to see and manipulate reality from angles that no material being could comprehend. From this impossible vantage point, he began his final assault on humanity. Human. Colonies throughout the galaxy simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not conquered, erased so completely that the space they had occupied forgot they had ever been there. The Emperor deleted them from reality one by one, unmaking them with the power of directed thought. New Geneva vanished mid-sentence as its planetary governor was broadcasting a speech. The mining colonies around Proxima Centauri disappeared between one moment and the next, leaving behind asteroid fields that had never been touched by human hands. Entire fleets winked out of existence as the Emperor's attention focused on them. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the systematic erasure of human civilization from the bridge of humanity's last remaining command ship. Around her, displays showed red lights going out across the galaxy as colonies, outposts, and entire worlds ceased to exist. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported with barely controlled terror, "we've lost contact with over 60% of our settlements. They're not just destroyed. Our computers can't remember they ever existed." Dr. Chen stood calmly at the center of the chaos, her aged hands steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. She was 73 years old now, having spent the last decade of her life preparing for this exact moment. "Activate the mirror protocol," she ordered. Her senior staff exchanged worried glances. They had all hoped it would never come to this. The mirror protocol was humanity's most desperate contingency plan, developed in absolute secrecy over the past 2 years. It was also the most dangerous thing any human had ever attempted. "Ma'am," her science officer said carefully, "the protocol has never been tested. We don't know if it will work, and if it fails." "If it fails, we all die anyway," Dr. Chen replied. "The Emperor is systematically erasing us from existence. This is our only chance." The mirror protocol was based on a simple but terrifying principle. Since the Emperor had merged all his consciousness into a single entity existing outside normal reality, the only way to defeat him was to create an exact duplicate of that entity and force both versions to occupy the same space. The resulting consciousness paradox would destroy both entities, but it required a volunteer to merge their mind with the duplicate Emperor. The process would be fatal for whoever attempted it. "I'll do it," Dr. Chen announced, walking toward the quantum consciousness chamber that had been installed in the ship's center. "Sarah?" "No," protested Dr. Martinez, her oldest friend and closest advisor. "We can find another way. We can evacuate the remaining colonies. Hide until..." "Until what?" Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "Until the Emperor finishes erasing every trace of human existence? Until he starts on our allies? This is what we trained for, Miguel. This is why we prepared." As Dr. Chen entered the consciousness chamber, her thoughts turned to the long journey that had brought humanity to this point. From first contact with Admiral Kethmore to the development of adaptive technology, from the swarm tactics that defeated the Third Fleet to the alliances that had given them hope. The humans had always been the underdogs in this fight. They had faced an empire with technology beyond imagination, weapons that could rewrite reality, and enemies who had conquered the galaxy through sheer force. But humanity had something the Dominion had forgotten existed: the absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Beginning consciousness duplication," Dr. Chen announced as the chamber powered up around her. "If this works, tell the galaxy that humans do not yield, do not break, and do not forget." The process was agony beyond description. Dr. Chen felt her consciousness being copied, analyzed, and reshaped into a perfect duplicate of the Emperor's merged entity. Her human thoughts were stretched across dimensions she could not comprehend, twisted into patterns that normal minds were never meant to experience. But she held on. Through the pain and the terror and the impossible pressure of existing in multiple realities simultaneously, she held on to the one thought that defined humanity: we do not give up. Emperor Vexathalar sensed the disturbance in reality as Dr. Chen's consciousness achieved the same dimensional state as his own. For the first time since beginning his merger, he felt surprise. How could a primitive human mind survive the transformation that had nearly destroyed his ancient, powerful consciousness? Impossible, he said, his voice echoing across dimensions. No organic mind can exist at this level of reality. You're right, Dr. Chen replied, her consciousness now matching his own impossible existence. No single organic mind can do this. But I'm not alone. That was when the Emperor realized the trap. Dr. Chen had not attempted the consciousness merger by herself. Somehow, she had linked her mind to every human in the galaxy, drawing strength from millions of minds working together. She carried, with her, the dreams of colonists, the courage of soldiers, the creativity of scientists, and the determination of children who had never known defeat. The duplicate emperor that Dr. Chen had become was not just a copy of Vexthalar's consciousness. It was a mirror that reflected everything he had forgotten about organic life. Where his thoughts were cold and calculating, hers burned with passion. Where his mind sought control and dominance, hers embraced chaos and creativity. You cannot defeat me, the Emperor said, bringing the full force of his will to bear on Dr. Chen's consciousness. I am eternal. I am absolute. I am— You are alone, Dr. Chen interrupted. You've been alone for so long that you forgot what it means to truly live. You exist, but you don't live. You control, but you don't create. You conquer, but you don't build. The consciousness paradox began as both entities tried to occupy the same dimensional space. Reality itself rebelled against the contradiction, creating tears in space-time that spread outward like cracks in broken glass. Emperor Vexthalar felt his perfect control slipping as Dr. Chen's chaotic human thoughts infected his ordered consciousness. Her memories of friendship, love, hope, and simple human joy burned through his mind like acid, destroying the cold certainty that had sustained him for millennia. This is what you could have been, Dr. Chen said, as both their consciousnesses began to unravel. If you had chosen to build instead of destroy, to create instead of conquer, to unite instead of dominate. The Emperor's final coherent thought was a moment of understanding. For just an instant, he saw the galaxy through human eyes, not as territory to be conquered, but as a community to be cherished. He glimpsed what his empire could have become if it had been built on cooperation instead of fear. Then the paradox reached critical mass, and both consciousnesses collapsed into quantum foam. The dimensional storms that followed tore holes in reality across multiple star systems. When they finally subsided, Emperor Vexathalar was gone. The crystalline ships of the Dominion fleet powered down as their God Emperor's presence vanished from the universe. On Zephyr Prime, the crystal beings who had served as the Empire's administrators looked around in confusion. For the first time in their species' history, they had no one telling them what to do. Across the galaxy, Dominion forces simply stopped fighting as their absolute authority disappeared. The rebellions that had started with humanity's first victory became liberation movements as entire sectors threw off the chains of imperial rule. Species that had been enslaved for millennia rediscovered their own cultures, languages, and dreams. Dr. Miguel Martinez stood on the bridge of the human command ship, tears streaming down his face as he watched the galaxy transform. Around him, officers cheered and cried and embraced each other as news of victory spread through their communication networks. She did it, he whispered. Sarah actually did it. In the years that followed, the galaxy rebuilt itself as a community of free species. Humans played a central role in establishing the new Galactic Council, but they refused to become the dominant power. They had learned too much about the dangers of absolute authority to ever want it for themselves. The war had cost humanity dearly. Billions had died, and Dr. Sarah Chen's sacrifice would never be forgotten. But her final words became the motto of the new galactic civilization. We do not yield, we do not break, and we do not forget. In the Great Library of New Geneva, rebuilt on a world that had been erased and restored, historians would write that the Dominion's greatest mistake was assuming that because humanity was young, they were weak. The Empire had never realized that sometimes the newest voice in the conversation has the most revolutionary things to say. The galaxy's strongest empire had fallen not to superior firepower or ancient magic, but to a species that simply refused to accept defeat as an option. And in doing so, humanity had given the galaxy its greatest gift, the knowledge that no power, no matter how absolute, could stand forever against the combined will of those who refused to surrender their freedom. The age of emperors was over. The age of cooperation had begun.